It's called green gold in Argentina, and for good reason. Soy is by far the top national export, representing more than 20% of what the South American country ships out. Foreign multinational corporations are dominating the soy industry, showing a hunger for more land to grow the crop. That has them turning their eyes to the forest of the Gran Chaco region, which has been home to native Argentinians for thousands of years. 30 ethnic groups form a community of more than 800,000 people in that region. And now they're at risk to lose it all, helplessly watching as foreign investors gobble up their lands. America's Now contributing correspondent Daniel Schweimler went to the remote Gran Chaco region and has this report.
This is Riacho de Oro, a Quom community, an indigenous village in the remote northern Argentine province of Formosa. Marginalized, forgotten, out of sight. It has no running water, and Emma MANCILLA and her neighbors are forced to find it where they can.
When we haven't got water, we go to the water hole or get it from the tank or the lake. We get water to cook, to wash, for everything.
The Quom, or Toba, like most of what remains of Argentina's indigenous peoples, have been pushed onto scraps of land which no one else wanted. This is a community that's been downtrodden for generations, practically wiped off the map. They're now raising their voices to demand a few basic necessities that most of us simply take for granted. Valentin SUAREZ is a bilingual teacher at the school and a local leader in the growing campaign for the voice of the Quom to be heard at the provincial and national levels.
The water supplies are getting scarcer. All around you see are old wells from periods of drought, when we took our shovels and dug until we found water. When the rain came, these holes were flooded. It's a homemade job because we don't have the money to buy bricks to make it permanent.
Another problem is land. Since many indigenous people don't have documents to prove their ownership, big agricultural corporations have been able to win legal battles to get their hands on the deeds.
When I was little here, everything was covered in forest, and now they've destroyed it all to grow genetically modified soy. Before, this whole territory belonged to the indigenous community, but they have taken it over, bit by bit.
Desperate and frustrated, the Quom have resorted to blocking highways to call attention to their plight and save their land. But these confrontations can turn violent.
Our land was taken away by local and national police forces with the backing of the government. They brutally evicted our elders. It was a big operation in which nobody could defend themselves. We lived as nomads. At the time, no one could read or write, so they abused us with the backing of the police force.
During an eviction in La Primavera in the north of Formosa province, 2 protesters were killed and some police were injured. Some indigenous people were taken to a local hospital. Once the land is lost, there's nowhere for them to go.
You lose your land and then you're forgotten. You will have to move to the slum or I don't know where. Well, definitely the slum, because to buy something in town, for us, that's impossible.
Their problems are well documented in efforts to get the authorities to listen. Community elder Cirilo Gomez reads in Quom, while local campaigner Alden Charoles translates into Spanish.
Por eso un día como hoy un día muy especial para que aquellos que tengan la posibilidad de ver.
FELIX DIAZ is from a Quom community near the border with Paraguay and is emerging as a national leader, representing the demands of all of Argentina's indigenous peoples.
The general and serious problem that is happening in Argentina is the failure to apply our rights as they're enshrined in both the provincial and national constitutions. These are written guarantees of the rights of indigenous people. designed to protect the lives of every indigenous person.
With little response from the regional governments, Argentina's indigenous movement has moved to the capital, Buenos Aires, to demand an audience with the president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
No, we don't have much hope. We've had many experiences with this president, and she won't solve the problem.
She has so far refused to meet them, despite these now weekly marches in front of the government palace. The history of discrimination and brutality goes back to when the Spaniards first set foot in America.
During the 19th century, Desert Campaign of General Roca, they sent the army to exterminate the indigenous people in an armed assault.
The desecration was so great that many, especially those in the cities, believed that Argentina no longer had an indigenous population. That perception is slowly changing. Indigenous campaigners establish links with those in organizations in the wider society, such as ALDO ETCHEGOYEN from the Buenos Aires-based NGO, the Popular Assembly for Human Rights.
This attitude of non-recognition is an attitude of discrimination. It's criminal and shows complete ignorance, absolute ignorance.
There are still many battles to be fought at both the local and the national levels. They say their relationship with the land is vital to their spiritual well-being. Meanwhile, most of Argentina's indigenous people must eke out a living the best way they can. A daily grind to find the basic necessities. Argentina does have an indigenous community, increasingly united and vocal, in touch with its heritage and fighting to be heard, fighting to find its place in a fast-moving, rapacious modern society.